titled Load Growth, Benefits and State Agency Roles. This is part of our ongoing series exploring how states are responding to increasing electricity demand. We are very grateful to the U.S. Department of Energy for their continued support of NCEP and this important work. Next slide. And the next slide. So before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded. Both the presentation and the recording will be available on our website, which is naruc.org/ncep. You can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We will address as many as we can during the session, and any unanswered questions will be shared with our speakers for follow-up after, if we don't get to them during the webinar today. And if you'd like to stay informed about future NCEP events, please join our listserv by selecting NCEP as an interest area in your MyNARUC account, which is pretty easy to create. And again, you can find that information at naruc.org. All right, next slide. For those who might be new to the National Council on Electricity Policy, we are a unique forum for state electricity decision makers to explore how emerging technologies, policies, and markets are shaping the grid. Next slide, please. The National Council on Electricity Policy is guided by an executive committee with representatives from our 6 national organizations. That includes NARUC, NASIO, NASUCA, NACA, NGA, and NCSL. All state officials and staff with roles that impact the energy system in any way are considered members of NCEP, including representatives from state utility commissions, state energy offices, consumer advocate offices, state legislatures, governor's offices, and air quality agencies. Other decision makers are also welcome to join our public discussions and our public events. Next slide. Today's webinar is how states are approaching load growth, benefits, and agency roles. And we have 3 more webinars in this series coming up. Managing Costs and Risks on October 20th, Balancing Speed and Engagement on November 17th, and State Agency Collaboration on December 15th. We also are excited to announce that our 2026 annual meeting will be focused on load growth, and it is scheduled for May 5th and 6th of 2026. You can register and find more information for all of these events on our website, www.naruc.org/ncep. Next slide. We have a series of panelists today who are composed of members of our executive committee, and we're very grateful for their participation today. Right now, I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Commissioner Sarah Freeman of the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, and she is a long-term member of our executive committee. Commissioner Freeman, over to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah. I'm so excited to be able to moderate this discussion today. We have a truly excellent group of speakers representing, as Deborah indicated, a wide range of state agencies and the perspectives that accompany those agencies in those roles. I'm going to be asking each panelist to introduce themselves by name and organization when we start the Q&A. But first, I'd like to set the stage a little bit. According to the Department of Energy, electricity demand is expected to rise nearly 16% by 2029. And a lot of this, as we know, is driven by data centers, AI applications, manufacturing, the onshoring of, and electrification. So our goal today is going to be to explore how state agencies and other office holders are responding to this growth, what benefits they're pursuing, what risks they're managing, and how they're collaborating together for the benefits of ratepayers. So to our panelists, as you introduce yourself, let's start our conversation about the role that each of your agencies or offices have when large loads kind of move into your neighborhoods, so to speak. I'm particularly interested in hearing about whether and how you engage directly with large load customers, or maybe if you're in more of a secondary or subsequent role in that discussion. And also if your approach is par for the course with your peers across the country, or if you think you're a little bit of an outlier in how you do things. And Anna, will you kick us off with this question, please?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Anna Perry. I serve as the Assistant Policy Director in Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's office. I focus primarily on energy and environmental issues. Thanks for the question, Commissioner Freeman. Our office really plays a coordinating role amongst various state agencies, our economic development entity, and then certainly those large load customers. We often hear from them directly as they're looking to come into our state. And then we convene local elected officials and regulators and those folks as needed. I would imagine this role is similar across the country for governor's offices, although some states have a more local government minded structure. So that might be a little bit different, but from our perspective, it kind of starts in our office and goes down from there.
Great. I believe I'm next. So my name is Senator DeAndrea Salvador, representing, excuse me, representing the NCSL, or the state legislative perspective. Is very similar. I think that we certainly coordinate with our governor's office as well as other entities. Particularly members of our legislative leadership may be aware if folks are looking to expand or build within the state. And it has been a growing interest in areas. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So I'm trying to get through that, going over various interests and engagement there. So as a legislator, of course, particularly in North Carolina, and similarly, this may differ depending on the specific area. The General Assembly does look really closely at our utility regulation, as well as evaluating in collaboration with various entities and stakeholders what types of economic incentives and things of that sort, particularly our Department of Commerce or other groups may be able to provide or consider. Additionally, if there might be any additional changes to statute that may be able to help encourage that, but also do that in a very mindful way. So thank you for the opportunity to join, and I'll use this break as an opportunity to get some water.
Sounds good.
Hey,
Chris.
good afternoon. I'm Kristofer Anderson. I'm the Director of Energy Resources at the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, which is the state's energy office here in Georgia. And I'll give a little perspective from our energy office, and then from kind of the national energy office level, representing the NASEO, National Association of State Energy Officials. So in our office, us, like most energy offices, we're not a regulatory body. And we're not an economic development body, so we don't have a direct role in that process when a large load wants to come to the state. We're more interested in it on a holistic level as far as impact to the energy grid in the state, as well as, of course, impact to resources overall, including water. We're also a water funding agency. So as far as we're concerned, we're much more interested on that kind of resource adequacy and impact standpoint, and on a policy level. From the energy office perspective, I think broadly speaking, most of us aren't regulatory agencies, so we're not as directly involved, although some energy offices are very closely tied to a governor's office and are much more involved in the policy discussion. And others are more interested from a grid and grid adequacy and grid support kind of level, having various grid programs or other types of energy programs that they operate. So yeah, I'll hand it off to the next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. My name is Michael Dowd. I'm Director of the Air and Renewable Energy Division for the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. DEQ's role is to ensure that all facilities comply with clean air and clean water requirements. Our mission is to ensure environmental permits are issued in a timely manner after conducting a thorough permitting process. In the case of air permits, We ensure the facility installs the best available air pollution control equipment and that its emissions do not violate EPA's health-based national ambient air quality standards. We consider permit applications as they come through the door. We do not set energy policy. And I strongly believe the role played by Virginia DEQ is substantially similar to that played by all other state environmental agencies. And I just want to add, with respect to large load facilities, data centers in particular, Virginia is ground zero. Loudoun County alone has over 200 data centers, making it the county with the highest concentration of data centers in the world. And at Virginia DEQ, we've issued air permits to approximately 5,500 generators at data centers with a total capacity of almost 14,000 megawatts. And that's in Loudoun County alone. So I will pass the baton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Sarah. I think I'm next. It's a pleasure to be with you all today, and I hope you're enjoying this nice weather up here in the Northeast. You know, I'm the commissioner of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, and similar to some of the other speakers, you know, we don't have a whole heck of a lot of influence on energy policy. We're required to enact legislature's policies, and of course, to provide adequate and safe energy and utilities at affordable prices. That's really our main goal. But if we're going to look at how do we respond to load growth, that's not really what we do as a deregulated state. We're kind of price takers through the auctions. But what we certainly do respond to, and what everyone is responding to now, is to price increases. So in that capacity, and realizing that we have to respond to price increases, which are a reflection of load growth and generating capacity, that's where we get involved. And that's what we're spending so much of our time now, figuring how much is legitimate load that we can estimate and how we can get generation online to make sure that those very important prices come down so people can afford to pay their bills.
Thanks, all of you, for responding to that question. And Commissioner Christodoulou, with respect to the uncertainty of these forecasts, right? Even when I was setting the stage for this and I said 16%, you know, increase by 2029, I'm like, we think it is. We don't, I mean, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we're all working so hard to nail it down as best we can. Next slide, please. And I also just want to encourage everybody, if you come up with questions along the way, please enter those into the Q&A, and we will save time for that at the end of our discussion. We have to have a slide entitled benefits, given the title of this webinar, of course. So next question is going to be exactly that. What kind of benefits are you and your agencies or offices, for you office holders, looking for from large load customers? And, you know, as examples, I'm kind of thinking about economic benefits, impacts on air quality, land use or water, opportunities for demand flexibility, that type of stuff, as well as the policies that are indicated here on the slide as well. So Chris, I'd like to start with you on this one, if we can.
Yeah, I think from my perspective in a state energy office, and I know this topic is coming up in a lot of discussions with state energy offices, is what kind of potential benefits from investment into especially energy efficiency or demand programs that might be able to be gained from large load customers and their growth. It could be an opportunity for us to engage on opportunities for investment into communities as these large loads are looking to identify places where they can grow and locate, how they can engage and interface with those communities as far as investments. A lot of us operate energy efficiency programs that impact low-income customers in our states, or other types of demand and grid programs. And so I think it's a good opportunity to have that conversation. And we're already starting to see some of that in Georgia, where we're engaging directly with some partners on a program development that involves some large load investment directly into the community. You know, as far as policies, we are like Virginia, one of the epicenters of large load growth in the country, and so we're seeing a lot of legislative activity. We're seeing activity out of our Public Service Commission, of course, around large loads, but also within our state legislature. We've had bills related to say tax credits on large loads passed through the legislature. Not enacted. One was vetoed by our governor, but we've also had a special committee set up on resource adequacy in the state legislature. So a lot of those conversations are really swirling, and I think there's going to be a lot more coming this winter into our next session. So a lot more to come. I think we're on the real early stage of it, but certainly there are policies being considered, and I think we'll see more movement on that.
Okay, I guess I'm next. As I mentioned before, DEQ's mission is to ensure that industrial sources comply with all environmental laws and regulations. But the economic benefits that large load facilities can bring to states and localities is huge. In Virginia, data centers are seen as engines of job creation and revenue. Data centers have supported an estimated 74,000 jobs in the Commonwealth and have added $9.1 billion to Virginia's gross domestic product, generating significant tax revenues. Virginia sees data centers as a rapidly growing industry that will attract even greater investment in the future. With respect to policies, Virginia has an all-of-the-above energy strategy when it comes to satisfying the electricity needs of the booming data center industry, but we have a gubernatorial and General Assembly elections coming up in November, and data center policies are going to be a big issue in Virginia's 2026 legislative session. And I think the next speaker also has a big election coming up in New Jersey in this November. I'll pass it on.
Perfect segue. Yeah, we are certainly right in the middle of heavy campaign season, and data centers maybe aren't as much on our front burner, but prices certainly are. And it has become one of the main issues clearly on the campaign trail. So, when we're talking about the benefits that we're looking to get from large loads, we're really talking in this time frame about data centers. I'd like to be talking about other types of development, which shouldn't get lost in the shuffle. We need to bring back manufacturing as we are. We're doing so many other things. And in New Jersey in particular, one of the things that we've done to a large load center, which is not a data center, is the Netflix studios that we just are in the middle of building now. And, we did some other interesting things in the state. We gave a lot of tax credits to bring Netflix to New Jersey. That's going to support a lot of ancillary and support industries, retail, hospitality, and so many other things. And that's where I just don't see how data centers can provide the same economic impact other than financial impact. So towns are fighting to try and get data centers if they can, the same way states are trying to get data centers into their states, because it does provide a great tax base, not necessarily a great employment base, maybe not even a huge, broad economic growth base, but it certainly does have the opportunity. And that's when we talk about large load growth, we're primarily focused now on data centers. And there's a lot of ambiguity about how much energy they're going to need. Even if we look at the fact that the advanced high-tech chips that are required to run these, only 60% of the chips that they're going to need will be available within the next 5 to 10 years. So we'll be building a lot of load growth and generation transmission lines to provide, say, a gigawatt of energy, but there's only enough chips available to run 60% of that load. So there are a lot of ambiguities and uncertainties in this market right now. And I think states are bending over backwards and tripping over each other to try and get data centers for some, in my opinion, an uncertain goal. But that doesn't mean they're not going to still fight for this nebulous result.
I think that what we're looking for from the governor's office as far as benefits is similar to what the other speakers have said. We're trying to understand what job creation there is, what investments they're bringing to the communities. We've actually seen some of our large load customers, specifically data centers, be good partners in the community, in the sense of, we've had water plant challenges or what have you, and they've been willing to help us with those investments, trying to be good neighbors while they also bring more development into the state. So that's been a benefit, and I think I would encourage folks to be willing to ask for those types of things from these types of customers. They want to be good partners where they can. And so while we're trying to understand all of those benefits, we also are cognizant, of course, of the impact on our electric grid, water resources, air permitting, all the things that our other speakers have said. Specific to policies in our state, our PUC did adopt a data center specific tariff earlier this year. I think getting to what the previous speaker was talking about of trying to understand what's real. We're hearing, crazy numbers of how much load is coming. And so our tariff, one part of it was, one of our utilities was saying we're gonna have 30,000 megawatts coming to Central Ohio. And we needed to understand if that's really real and if we need to build the infrastructure. So part of the tariff was asking those data centers to come back and reaffirm their commitment to the utilities that they do in fact want to come. So we just closed that process and the number has come down. It's still significant, but it's come down. And then we also have tax incentives and local incentives as well, from a policy perspective.
Great. So very similar to what all the panelists have shared, in particular, Anna's sentiments, as we are also, so our governor's office, to piggyback to the NGA perspective, our governor recently did an executive order that was focusing, yes, on the growth in electric demand, but also particularly in our role as elected officials, understanding the balancing act of the benefits. So economic development, yes. We also like to point out that we are very much pushing on manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, a number of other things that could fall under that very nebulous title of large load growth, and have seen quite a few jobs even recently with the announcement of Jet Zero coming to Greensboro, into the tens of thousands. So we are looking at that. We're certainly looking at the impact on the tax base, but also really wanting to understand what it is that we may need to do in terms of balance. The key core question that comes up is understanding the cost, environmental, other impacts, and ways that we can both accelerate that economic development, but try to have as much visibility that we can. So that executive order and the Energy Policy Task Force for the state was established earlier this month, so that they will be convening the first meeting pretty soon. And I anticipate we'll certainly be looking at additional states and what other folks are doing there. So those are just a few, but I think the panel really touched on a number of core areas that we've seen and currently will continue to look into.
Thank you, Senator Salvador. Really appreciate that. Commissioner Christodoulou, I think we'll start this next round of answers with you. And next slide, please. Does New Jersey have a framework or strategy to address the emergence of these large loads? And I mean that in a little bit different way than the types of, policy frameworks we were looking at with the benefits. So is there a coordinated strategy across various agencies in your state? And if so, how are you collaborating and exchanging information, especially, at least in my experience, when so much of the information can be confidential or otherwise subject to non-disclosure agreements?
Yeah, and that's a really great point, which we'll get to. But initially, I'd like to just mention this industry, in particular data centers, is really in its infancy. Even reshoring manufacturing is very new. 2 years ago, we weren't really talking about this. This has all come about within the last 12 to 24 months. Data centers, the same thing. So because of its newness, and in particular Virginia, New Jersey with elections, which are a different thing altogether, but because of its newness, we really haven't had a chance to coordinate as well as I would like and as well as we should. There are so many uncertainties and people are going in different directions trying to settle on some path forward. So until we identify really the goal and the path forward, it's going to be very difficult for different organizations and different agencies to coordinate their actions. So I regret to respond to your question that we are not coordinating as much as I would like. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's territorial things, proprietary things, and all of a sudden pride of ownership, which is never a good thing when you're trying to coordinate something large like this. But also, just moving forward, we will eventually settle in on how we can coordinate because we're going to have to. And that extends even beyond an intra-state mechanism, but also an interstate mechanism. We do really have to figure out how much is legit load growth, how many of these are redundant applications just to get the first yes and then move into that state. And because of the proprietary nature that you brought up is a very important point. We really won't know at this point in the way it's structured, how we can guarantee that when a hyperscaler comes to a state and says, we want to build this, and then they go to another state and say, we want to build the same thing in your state, knowing that they're only going to build one. There needs to be a clearinghouse, someone, an entity that can be trusted. So then this proprietary information will not be leaked. Like, I mean, by law, couldn't be leaked to the SEC. That'd be a terrible violation of stockholder rights. But there has to be some way to identify which is legit and which is just speculative. So we're caught in that little bubble at this point. There's a long way to go, and we do need to collaborate better. As of yet, I'm not overly thrilled with how well we've discussed with each other.
Thank you for that candid response. Anna?
I would like to say we're coordinated. We've been playing this game for a little while, but I think that the pace and the speed at which it's coming, it makes it hard to be coordinated. Even if you have a structure already in place, sometimes that just falls apart a little bit as projects are moving quickly. In Ohio, a lot of these large load specific data centers start with our economic development entity. It's called Jobs Ohio. And then Jobs Ohio does a great job of keeping our office informed, but then bringing in other state agencies as needed. And for the most part, I'll say it works well. And I think we're still learning as we go and bringing new partners in every time. And each project is different and has different challenges. So it's a bit of an iterative process, certainly.
Yeah, so we're pretty similar in that regard. I think there is some information sharing just that is allowed beyond that, but between at least awareness for our utility as our economic development folks are talking to different entities. So with our specific branch of it, I think that ebbs and flows certainly, but there are clear limitations to that. Our Utilities Commission is currently kicking off a technical conference, which will have different stakeholders involved to essentially consider what are areas of opportunity moving forward for the state. And also, in addition to that, the task force that I also mentioned is looking at it as well, but it is certainly a work in progress to understand specifically what we want to do. And also candidly, we are not in an election year, but we will be very soon. And quite honestly, I think our election year has started. So we are starting to see conversations about the future of electricity in our state, the impact on cost, also from a jobs perspective, already starting to take hold. So I certainly will be keeping a close eye on other states as well as we consider that. And then I just want to make sure I'm reading the question here. In terms of our General Assembly, we certainly will, between our various, our two chambers, will have conversations to make sure that whether that is holding a committee hearing, which is something that has been done before on specific topics to gain information from the utility, public staff, things of that sort in terms of general updates is one type of way. But again, it's less on the procurement, is more on just general public understanding, things of that sort.
Thank you.
I think our state in Georgia is quite good at going after and supporting large load, and we've certainly had a lot of, I think, big announcements over recent years on even beyond data centers. So there are a whole bunch of agencies involved, and each one kind of has different roles to play. I think though, like others have said, there's definitely room for improvement as how the state looks at that. And I think there are a couple things going on to kind of support that. I mentioned that our House of Representatives, our Speaker of the House, instituted a special committee on resource management this past winter, looking at energy and water, because there are a lot of concerns across the state among legislators, among local governments, among residents on what the impacts are on energy and water in the state when we have these large loads come in. and it's gotten a fair bit of public attention. So certainly we have elected officials who are very concerned about what the benefits and impacts of these developments are around the state. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that process. It's already held a whole bunch of meetings around the state with more to come. Also, a relatively new development over this summer is our Department of Community Affairs and their role in looking at what they call developments of regional impacts. They've put out proposed new rules on what that would mean for data centers as far as collecting of that data and analyzing it as they go through how they look at any sort of large regional impact development, but trying to figure out how they can get data that is more specific to data centers, and how they can work with the regional commissions across the state to look at that data and really evaluate what those impacts are. So I think there are really a couple of significant things happening in the state that hopefully can help lead to more clarity and better collaboration and perhaps a more holistic policy framework as we look towards more of these in the future.
Thanks. Mike?
Okay, well, as I said before, Virginia has an all of the above energy strategy. But beyond that, we really have not established any particular policy framework for addressing the needs of large load facilities. But as I also mentioned earlier, the Commonwealth has a gubernatorial and General Assembly elections in November, and data center policy will be a huge issue, as I said before, in the upcoming legislative session. Right now, interest groups are developing their legislative priorities, bills are being drafted, and the candidates for governor are keeping their cards pretty close to their vests on data center issues and energy issues. Now, it's important to understand that data centers and large load facilities are part of larger policy issues related to Virginia's overall energy policy, solar policy development, and the Virginia Clean Economy Act that mandates the near total decarbonization of Virginia's energy sector by 2045. There's going to be lots of debate on these issues in 26. It's going to be very difficult to integrate and synthesize all these different issues and approaches. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all turns out this time next year.
Thank you for that. Yeah, listening to you, Mike, and Commissioner Christodoulou talk about your upcoming elections, it's making me kind of glad that this is the one off year in the 4-year cycle for Indiana. We get a little bit of a breather. So good luck to y'all as you navigate that over the coming months. We'll go to our next slide. For the final question that I'll be posing to our panelists. And thank you to those of you in the audience who have been putting your questions into the Q&A. Please continue to do so, and we'll get around to those. So with the questions here, I think we can end where we started. Anna, if you don't mind. Does all of this coordination and collaboration that we've been trying to talk about here extend into local jurisdictions or agencies as well? Thinking maybe about municipalities or counties that could be responsible for siting and permitting, as an example. And as all of you are navigating across not just agencies, but potentially across, jurisdictions within your state, or as was mentioned earlier, getting to some point across states, what gaps have you identified with respect to either participants that need to be brought to the table or information that would be helpful for you to receive from your fellow agencies or office holders? So Anna, love to hear from you.
Yeah, we certainly engage with the local governments as we look at large loads coming to the state, and we encourage those large load customers to engage early and often with the local communities. I think it's important that, as I mentioned earlier, that they be good partners in the communities that they're in. And so that's a really important voice, especially to my governor. He often asks, well, where's County Commissioner so-and-so on this issue, or, what have you. So that's very important to us. As far as the kind of information or impacts and benefits, I think, as some of the other panelists mentioned, The confidential nature of some of this work makes it hard to get all of the answers to our questions. Sometimes large load customers just aren't willing to share specific details that would make making decisions easier, or explaining to those communities why, the state has decided to allow such and such customer to go there. And so I think we do a pretty good job at the state level of sharing information. It's sometimes getting those details that we need from the customers themselves.
Okay, I guess I'm next this time. Well, DEQ addresses the environmental issues posed by large load facilities. Obviously, the most important state agency from an energy standpoint is our State Corporation Commission, which determines if new power plants are prudent and in the public interest. And of course, it sets rates for our regulated public utilities. I'll add that while DEQ's environmental permitting processes and the SCC's processes are totally separate, DEQ does provide environmental impact review to the SCC for energy projects seeking certificates of public convenience and necessity. Turning to localities, the role of local and county and municipal governments in the siting of energy projects and large facilities is huge in Virginia. It's local governments who determine through zoning whether proposed facilities comply with local land use requirements. And in fact, DEQ cannot issue an air permit for a proposed facility until the project has received all of the approvals it needs from the local government. And as can be expected, local governments are very sensitive to the views of their residents, which has resulted in several almost virtual bans on data centers and large power projects in parts of Virginia. Unfortunately, some of the early data centers, there are pictures taken of data centers putting their engines about 10 yards from $800,000 homes. The pictures really poison the well. And there's just been a tremendous public opposition in most parts of Virginia to data centers, as well as to other power projects. There will likely be several bills aimed at restricting the power of localities to deny such projects and data centers in our next General Assembly session. I'd be surprised if any passed, but who knows? That's it.
Am I next, Sarah?
You are. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So look, some of the agencies, it's not the list is long. I mean, if we really want to think about large load, it's large construction projects, and you're not going to get that done without labor and without the unions. So they're early participants in this process. Workforce development that's going to handle a lot of these new jobs is critical to us also. But local governments, it's been mentioned before about zoning laws and trying to get community impact studies done and involvement and their buy-in. But primarily, it's going to be the DEP, environmental protection, the EDA, economic development, that's going to really drive this along with the PUC, in our case, the Board of Public Utilities, to see what energy loads are going to be necessary for all this. And in our case, something that we can't ignore is PJM. Our RTO has to be involved in this as well. So on any large load, whether it's going to be a Netflix studio or a data center or a large shopping mall, these are the type of participants and partners that we're going to need to talk with and coordinate with. The information that we're going to need varies, different agencies are going to require different elements of information, but we're going to have to think about how much the energy load is, who's going to pay for it, the transmission line. Is it going to be paid for by everyone, or are we going to make just the hyperscaler pay for that? Are we going to make them bring their own energy, which is something that is going around the circles? There's not enough energy to go around. So if a data center wants to open in a particular state, we're going to force them to bring their own energy. Look, that's, I think, a big barrier to entry versus another state who might say, tap into our existing nuclear plant like Pennsylvania is doing. So these are very competitive elements between states. I'd like there to be more coordination, and holistic is a nice word to toss around. I haven't seen it enacted many times. It's a great word. I like it. But between water supplies, not just for energy generation, but also to cool data centers. It's a very important component to this, and data centers, hyperscale size, have to be next to a large water supply to cool their chips. The density, energy density per chip is increasing dramatically. So that's another concern. I think you'll know in Loudoun County, I was there recently visiting a friend, and the data centers are everywhere. Some of them are quite loud. And some of the residents that are close complain about that. There aren't many workers, but there is a lot of noise. And then if in the case of a load shedding event, who goes first? Do data centers have to agree to shed load before anyone else? So these are a lot of the concerns. What I'd really like from these large load centers would be great. Bring their own energy, pay for it, pay for their own transmission, and then guarantee through long-term contracts that whatever costs they incurred, they will pay for everything and not the ratepayers.
Yeah,
Chris, and then okay.
and in Georgia, certainly there's a range of state agencies involved in the process, from our Department of Community Affairs, Economic Development, Public Service Commission. But I think, the local level is so critical, and like others have said, local governments and residents are getting more sophisticated in their, or have more views on these now than they might have a year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so we're seeing within Georgia, and especially Metro Atlanta, local government, cities and counties placing moratoriums on the development of data centers, requiring special use permits that come with specific data requests. And I think that's going to be something that we may well continue to see grow. And so without the local governments and their residents being on board, that's a large barrier to the placement of these. So I think as far as data and information that agencies need and local governments want, it's not just thinking through the energy impacts, the rate impacts, or impacts on local drinking water supplies, but also thinking about things like tree impacts. Tree impacts is a major discussion in North Georgia. Stormwater management, transmission, distribution line placement. We've got lots of local battles happening around that across the region, and that's going to be a big challenge to work through. And I think more data and coordination and information sharing is going to be very important to that process. So I think there's, we're in the early stages in a lot of ways, and more to come as we work through these really big challenges.
Sure. Thank you. And Senator Salvador, you'll get the last word for this portion of our programming.
Yeah, thank you. So just to echo all of those sentiments, the local agencies are increasingly important. We just very close to where I live in Charlotte, there was recently, it's actually a smaller project comparatively that was being announced at the local level for their zoning considerations, and residents came with a number of concerns, and to the point of like information asymmetry between various stakeholders and the public, and what can be shared and when. That also can be quite difficult in being able to understand, and for residents, constituents to understand the potential impacts, benefits, et cetera. And some of the concerns from residents in those moments were ranging from everything from noise pollution to others in terms of the impacts, as well as the, one part was the jobs impact per, acreage, and trying to understand if in place of this, what else could be there, and community wanting to get more information about those concerns. And that particular case is still very much ongoing, but local agencies play a huge role in being able for things to progress, and is something that, will be increasingly critical, and, rightfully so, because we want people to be well informed about what is happening in their neighborhoods, their backyards, and across the state.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists. This has just been really very informative. And again, I'm super pleased to have been part of the conversation. Thank you to everybody who's been putting questions into the Q&A. And I'm going to hand it back over to Deborah to handle that portion of our discussion. I'll quickly note that a couple of the questions that came in early have been moved over to the answered column. So check there for responses if you don't hear your question being answered verbally. So Deborah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Freeman. This has been a fabulous discussion. I admit I turned on the transcript because I think I'm going to want to go back and read it again. So it looks to me like there's an individual, one topic that has come up in the questions is load forecasting. And sort of the idea of coordinating load forecasting both within the state and between states. And I was just curious if any of our panelists have any thoughts on what would be most useful. Do you have any ideas about how to coordinate that load forecasting? And there have been also a couple of suggestions about who might do that coordination, but just what would be useful to you from, and kind of thinking from your agency perspective. And I would ask Dr. Z to go first, if you don't mind.
Sure, Deborah, no problem. Well, look, I think the forecast is the key to this, to really understand what we can expect. And Commissioner Freeman and I know very well when we look at some of the PJM estimates over the last 20 years, their load forecasts have all been wrong. And I think they're doing a great job. They're giving their best effort, and that's great. Nothing deliberate, of course, but they've always overestimated. But now they're very large estimates we assume are correct. Sometimes that gives me a little pause, that maybe we should question this a little bit. But it would be nice, and I think very helpful, and some of the states are actually working on this effort, for states themselves to do their own load forecasts. And we're going to try to do something of the sort in New Jersey to try and figure out really what is a legitimate load forecast. I think PSE&G alone, one of our major utilities, had an estimate in August for 4.7 gigawatts for data centers. And 2 weeks later, that number went up to 6 gigawatts. That sounds great. It's like a stock market run. I love that. I wish I bought low and could sell high. But other than that, where's the reality? These numbers just seem to be all over the place. I'm not saying they're wrong, but when they vary so much, we need to get a little sense of how these things really are going to impact ratepayers in the long run. So I think states would be well served to come up with their own load forecasts and to share those numbers with other states. I think that kind of coordination, which would really give a lot more power back to the ratepayers and to the citizens, and take it away a little bit from the people who are behind the curtain, giving us these numbers upon which we depend so desperately. So I think that that would help a lot.
Thank you. I was going to ask Senator Salvador if you wanted to respond to this, and if you don't, you can just say pass. But
Oh, I'm sorry. I was typing in an answer to the task force question here. I'll just drop it there to provide that. Which question were we on? And that's in the answer column for that participant who wanted to know more about the task force and the technical conference.
Yeah, thank you for taking care of that. I will note for you, Dr. Z, there's one in here for you too, in the Q&A.
Should I reply to it?
Just the type answer thing would be great. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, so the question, Senator Salvador, was around load growth. What would be helpful in terms of coordination within your state, between other states? And Dr. Z suggested states coming up with their own forecast of load growth. And so I just would be curious from a legislator's perspective what that might look like. How difficult would that be?
Yeah, well, I guess within our state, being that we predominantly for our state, it is a vertically integrated regulated utility. And so we do see their resource plans, as well as they also do put a certain amount of forecasting in the carbon plan, which we're anticipating. So between that is, there is, I guess, the accuracy of models, especially when you're talking about growth, is quite tough. And so if anybody has that perfect thing, I would certainly love to see it. So there's always areas of improvement. But that is something that we frequently get briefed on, at least within our state, from the utility, as well as the Utilities Commission. to understand that. And as far as state by state sharing, I only more so can talk from the legislator perspective. There's different, conferences and things of that sort, even from NCSL, where we try to see if there's ways to enhance information sharing and collaboration and understanding, particularly if maybe loads are bidding in multiple states, just what is the true level of engagement there. But that's, a quick answer for you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. Would anyone else on the panel like to respond? Or shall we go to some of the other questions? Okay. Well then. There are, again, a couple of questions in the chat about for individuals. So if you panelists would take a look. But the other one is, how do we balance the benefits of bringing in jobs and tax revenues from these companies with concerns from residents? Does it vary a lot by local agency? And are local agencies or state agencies coming together to address this, to balance the benefits of bringing in jobs and tax revenue with the concerns from the residents? And that is, I think, the last question. It was from an anonymous attendee at 11:45. Would anyone like to respond to that? I was going to ask you, Mike Dowd, if you might be willing to begin. Oops. You're still muted.
I am. The question's recovering the mute button. That's a really hard one. I certainly wish I had an answer to it. I'll give you just an example as how complicated it is. Data centers are spilling out from Loudoun County into Prince William County, and the politics are wild. It's not a D or R issue. In some respects, it's an economic issue. And in Prince William County, it's been fascinating. The eastern part of the state of the county is lower income. It's dominated by Democrats. The western part is more affluent. It's more Republicans. The Democrats basically control the board of supervisors. The eastern part of the county has done a data center alley zoning thing that affects the western part of the state. They want the revenue. The folks in the more affluent part of the state don't want data centers. They don't want them being 20 feet from their home. They don't want the noise. And at the moment, the eastern folks won, but it was overturned in court. And I've been up at hearings for permits and variances up there, and it's bitter. I mean, there's real hatred in a lot of the people who come to these things. And it almost is a reflection of politics today in general, unfortunately. I suspect eventually there'll have to be some state legislation that balances it. But I'll be surprised if anything in Virginia passes this year. If anyone has a better answer, if anyone has answers rather than questions, let me know. But I've seen it firsthand, and it's bitter, and I don't see where the resolution's coming from. I'm sorry to cast such a pall over the discussion.
Right. Well, look, if there weren't challenges, we wouldn't be here. Chris, I was wondering if you might like to respond to this as well, just in terms of balancing the benefits and jobs and tax revenue.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that we don't know and that's gonna have to come as far as getting more experience and more accurate data we know there's so many construction jobs. Certainly, I think that's something that's pretty not easy, but like can confidently kind of project out what that takes. But long term, operationally, what do the jobs look like? It's such a new thing. Do we really know for certain how many full-time permanent jobs are going to be there 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What does that look like? So can you really do a great cost benefit analysis at this early stage? So I think we've got to figure out more there. I think we've got to see how local governments and communities can directly engage with these large developments and look at things like what potential benefits might be able to come into the community beyond jobs. Are there investments that can be made? Are there partnerships that can be developed there to invest into perhaps programs that help support maybe lower income residents or efficiency programs or those kinds of things? So it's so early in the game, it seems like, at least in most states, that I don't know if the level of sophistication is in all the data that we have is available to fully analyze it, frankly.
Thank you. I was going to ask Anna if you might like to respond to this question. Can you talk about any supply side responses to increase generation in response to load growth? And what opportunities do you see on that side of the question? And if anyone else would like to respond, I certainly welcome that. But just this idea that it's not all tragic, I suppose.
Yeah, we've seen some new generation coming into Ohio. We're a deregulated state, so similar to what Commissioner Christodoulou said earlier, we rely on the markets to supply, but we've seen a emergence of behind the meter generation. Some of our data centers are bringing their own generation to the table because they want to meet the timelines that they want. And so we've had, I think, about 8 projects so far have brought natural gas behind the meter plants. And those have been interesting to try to cite in the communities where the data centers are going. But for right now, in the near term, that's the most immediate solution for our state to get them built while the market starts to respond. And on that larger market side, we've had a lot of, over the last 6 to 8 years, we've had a lot of solar come to Ohio, which is somewhat ironic. It's not always very sunny here, but apparently it's easy to build solar because we have flat land. But we're starting to see natural gas, utility scale natural gas come into our power siting board. And that's, the first time we've seen that in several years. So we're starting to see supply come meet that demand a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else on this? It's such a fascinating thing. Have you seen other new generation? Dr. Z, did you unmute?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you, Deborah, this is an incredible opportunity because I don't think any of us in our recorded memories can think of any time when so much money is involved and so many big players are able to change a game. I mean, these hyperscalers are enormous. Look at their market caps, 10, 12 trillion dollars in market cap of 4 or 5 companies. Nothing will stop them from figuring this out. So that's kind of good because they're incentivized and they have the resources. So, on the supply side response, demand response is a supply. It could be considered a generation resource, batteries and storage. They're going to find ways to do this and to make sure that those markets work perfectly and that they can use their own AI to figure out how do we, cut load at the right time? Where do we put transmission lines? When can we make sure to make it so efficient? And the other thing, I'm very confident in their longer term outlook. Amazon started with books. Now they're everywhere, right? Everyone's going to look to gain global market share. So if energy is the critical component, I have every faith that our big hyperscalers are going to find ways to drive down the cost of generation. They're going to find new technologies. If SMRs are the answer, they're going to find ways to turn these out and deliver them to your house by drone, in 20 minutes. They're going to find a way to streamline this. They're going to find a way to drive down costs and to increase generation in a way potentially that we've never seen before. They have so much money, so much influence in Washington and capitals all over the country. They will not be stopped. If they're on our side, I think they're going to come up with some good supply solutions. So that's my positive side. The negative side is what AI can do to society. That's a separate discussion. We could talk for days about that. But I do think that big data centers and the money behind them could lead to very interesting, radically different technologies to solve many of our supply issues.
Thank you so much. A sincere round of virtual applause for all of our panelists. This has been a great discussion. Thank you so much, Commissioner Freeman, for moderating. Again, this has been just a delightful conversation. I would encourage you to go to www.naruc.org/NCEP. You can register for our upcoming events. We have additional resources out there to share. Again, thank you so much to everyone for being here. And with that, there's a wrap.